Back with us on the SportsMax Zone. European football's governing body, UEFA, is said to announce it will be shifting the Champions League final from St. Petersburg following Russia's invasion of Ukraine earlier today. In the latest response from UEFA, its president, Alexander Chefrin, called an emergency meeting of executive committee members for Friday, following which UEFA's official decision will be communicated. On the matter of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, UEFA also had this to say. UEFA shares the international community's significant concern for the security situation developing in Europe and strongly condemns the ongoing Russian military invasion in Ukraine. As the governing body of European football, UEFA is working tirelessly to develop and promote football according to common European values such as peace and respect for human rights. We're dealing with this situation with the utmost seriousness and urgency. Decisions will be taken by the UEFA Executive Committee and announced tomorrow, which of course is Friday. Now, joining us to discuss what UEFA is expected to do is is our British-based analyst, Simon Evans, who I'm not sure how long ago he came home from Beijing, where he was working on the Winter Olympics. Welcome to the sports. Welcome back, Simon. It is proper to say.
Thank you. Good to be back. Yeah, not a story we expected to be dealing with, this one, is it?
No, not at all. So, based on the factors at play, and I'm perplexed by the rather tame statements made by the FIFA president at his press conference. We hear that UEFA is set to announce that St. Petersburg will not have the privilege of hosting the Champions League final. Based on your best information, is that the decision that's likely to be communicated tomorrow?
Yeah, I think that's going to be formalised tomorrow. UEFA, I mean, they can't possibly in this situation talk about holding an event where people from across Europe will be travelling to a venue in a couple of months where we've got a war situation in Europe. So I don't think UEFA really has a difficult decision to make there. They obviously have to find a replacement venue for it, but FIFA also has some issues to deal with World Cup playoff matches and so on, and across the range of sports. There's events taking place in Russia which is very hard to see how they will go ahead now.
Yeah, so a little more on that, because guess what? Gianni Infantino suggested almost that, look, we're a month away from those World Cup qualifiers involving Russia, Poland, Sweden and the Czech Republic. And so, you know, it's almost like he was suggesting that, well, if the fighting stops now, we have a few weeks to go, maybe there'll be no fighting in a few weeks, so we won't have to postpone the games. That's a suggestion I got, or reschedule the games from there. While the UEFA are saying, well, even though the Champions League final is several weeks away, we are acting now because regardless of what happens in the weeks and months to come, what Russia has done by virtue of this act is sufficient to have this privilege removed. And I'm wondering about the coordination, if any, between UEFA and FIFA in this matter.
Yeah, that's a fair question. The relations between UEFA and FIFA have not been smooth over the last year or so, as we know. So it wouldn't be a surprise if there hasn't been great coordination there on this issue. They are slightly different. You know, FIFA's games are talking about home games for Russia in qualifiers. Down the line, perhaps FIFA think that if the situation is somehow normalised by then and Russia can guarantee security and safety for people, then those games could go ahead. Whereas UEFA are talking about holding their showcase game, which could involve a Spanish team and an English team or an Italian team and a German team. We're not talking about routine qualifiers or games that actually belong in that sense to Russia. This is a game that was awarded to Russia, a showpiece game for UEFA. And I think they think that not only from a security point of view, but also from an image point of view, it wouldn't look good to be celebrating in May in St. Petersburg, whatever the situation might be.
Yeah, very, very heartbreaking situation, Simon. But let's talk a bit now about the ramifications if the games are moved to a new location. Like, how will it affect those involved, maybe the sponsors, you know, just all the people involved in taking part?
Yeah, well, UEFA's got used to this over the last few years, haven't they, with the COVID situation forcing, you know, we were moved from Istanbul to Porto last year. The year before, the whole event was played in Lisbon, the final 8. So UEFA's got used to this. And a little bit, the idea that you need 2 years to prepare for these kind of events, and so they make these big announcements years ahead of time, has been proven to be a bit of a myth. You can put on a Champions League final at fairly short notice. So I think whoever they decide to be the benefactor, if you like, the one who gets this game instead of St. Petersburg, will have enough time to put it on and make sure everything is in place. And of course, there are still some COVID travel restrictions in Europe that could be a factor in that. We've only just seen, restrictions lifted in the UK this week, so it's not going to be totally straightforward, but they shouldn't have a problem finding somewhere to play that game.
Yeah, are you surprised that, some of the large governing sporting bodies have, spoken out about it? In F1, Sebastian Vettel saying that, he wants no part, he will not compete if they have the Russian Grand Prix, all these different people coming to the forefront.
Yes, there's been quite an outpouring, and also from within Russia as well, some as part of the protests there against the war. It's going to continue, I'm sure. A lot depends, I think, in terms of Russia's involvement in international sport. I think a lot depends on just how long this goes on for, and how the situation develops. If this becomes, a worst-case scenario, well, not even a worst-case scenario, but a very bad scenario of a long-running battle going on in that country and a lot of bloodshed, it's hard to see how Russia competes in European sport and international sport at all. But if it's something that's over with in a relatively short period of time and there's agreements and a normalisation, then maybe sport will normalise as well. But at the moment, it's very, very difficult to see how anyone can be travelling to Russia at the moment to take part in sport events.
Simon, the Russian energy giant Gazprom has been under the microscope since this issue started because they are a long-standing major sponsor of European football. How might their relationship with UEFA get tied into or knocked over by this issue?
Yeah, a lot comes down to the economic sanctions, exactly how they will impact Gazprom. If it follows the pattern of most of those international sanctions and the ones that are led by the United States, companies who do business with sanctioned companies can also face sanctions themselves. That's usually how these things work. And I'm not sure, to be honest, at the moment, the exact status of Gazprom, because, of course, they do provide energy to various parts of Europe. They sponsor Schalke in the Bundesliga, as well as being one of the Champions League premium sponsors. But if they were to become on a sanctions list from the United States, then it would be very difficult for UEFA to continue to have them as a premium partner. And also, I believe Schalke have now said that they're not having that sponsor on their shirt at the moment. The newspapers, one of the newspapers, Bild in Germany, had actually taken to removing the Gazprom logo from photographs on its website and in its newspaper and replaced it with Free Ukraine slogan photoshopped on there. So going to be a lot of questions about Gazprom. They have their fingers in quite a few pies.
Yeah, and to follow up on Mariah's question earlier on about the possible new venue for the May 28 UEFA Champions League final, I heard some discussion today on the BBC, and some major venues would be ruled out, like Wembley. I think Wembley has an EFL trophy final or some major final on that date. And the possibility looms that Portugal could again come in on stages, since they have made themselves ready in these contingency situations in the recent past.
Yeah, it's a place they've turned to. They're flexible. They've got stadiums available and the logistical capacity to take it on. And they don't have a lot of other conflicts on their sporting agenda, so they would be high up the list, I'm sure. But also, I think there would be some pressure within UEFA to reward some other cities. It's quite a prize when you get the fans turning up. There's quite an economic boon for that location. Although, maybe they will look at it and say, look, Portugal has taken on the last two finals in situations where they weren't able to benefit from it because there weren't fans there, very few fans in Porto and none at all in Lisbon the year before. And maybe that would be a way to allow the Portuguese to get some economic benefit from hosting this time.
Simon, just give my viewers a sense of how much Russian money is in European football.
Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, you look at obviously Chelsea's the most high-profile club that's been in under Russian control. Although Roman Abramovich has now got a number of other citizenships and passports to his name, but obviously Russian money was what propelled Chelsea to the position that they're in now as a top club. They weren't at that status at all before he came in. There's money in other clubs as well. Monaco has had a lot of Russian money in it. And, Gazprom, as we were saying, they're in there sponsoring and so on. And there's smaller Russia owners in clubs in various countries, including in England. So Bournemouth, for example, are a club that had a lot of Russian money in there. Now, how much these sanctions target relatively minor, by the big terms of the big picture of oligarchs, relatively minor figures who are investing in clubs like Bournemouth, and whether they're going to be more limited towards the top people close to Putin who are worth billions remains to be seen. But certainly the mood in Europe after the shock of what has happened leans towards being very strict on this, and so there could be quite a ripple effect throughout football. And
the other question concerns the FIFA situation, because if it is that FIFA is compelled, as I think they're going to have to be compelled to move the games that the Russians have in that playoff sequence in March for the FIFA World Cup places. If those games aren't going to be played on Russian soil for the Russian team, who is likely to host those games, given that political pressure will cause some governments to face difficulties in hosting the games on their turf? In other words, the equivalent of the Russian home fixture. And even when the Russians play away against a team that they're drawn with, I can see political pressure being exerted saying, do not allow those Russians in our country as a mark of solidarity with the people of Ukraine. Do you see that, as I'm seeing it, as a potential problem point in this whole saga?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the FIFA wouldn't want to have a situation where they were hosting Russian games and there were then protests that maybe got out of hand or something like that could, damage FIFA and upset the whole structure of putting on football matches that should be peaceful and secure. So I would think it would be highly unlikely that they would be played in countries that are geographically closer to Russia. So I don't think it would be in places like Budapest or Warsaw or anywhere like that. I think they would have to play them in countries with less of a direct connection to the situation and to Russia, and neutral venues where they could have decent security. It may be very small countries that we wouldn't be thinking of. Who knows where they could put those games on, to be quite frank.
Yeah, Simon, the last discussion point with you involves more than football, but it's just sport in general, and it's this. I was thinking to myself earlier today that I wonder how Thomas Bach and the IOC feel at this time, because we know that the revelation of systemic and systematic doping from the Russians in sport, especially at the Olympics, and for all intents and purposes it being state-sponsored, and what seemed to be an attempt by the IOC especially to not be too hard on the Russians, to let athletes compete under the Russian Olympic Committee banner, still Russian athletes competing without Russian flags being at the events, because, people didn't want to isolate Russia from the international community, and given that they had spent so much, and by spending so much meant so much, you wanted to still keep them close, despite them being under sanction, being banned from officially taking their place at the games. And now this turn of events. So what I'm getting at is a deliberate attempt not to mollycoddle, but to still embrace the Russians, notwithstanding the evils that they did in terms of doping athletes, just to keep them a part of the international community. And this blatant act of war showing that they only want to remain a part of the international community on their own terms. And I wonder if people like Thomas Bach and the IOC don't now believe that they should have been hard on the Russians from the very first go, because embracing them in the way they have has not redounded to the benefit of sport and fairness in sport.
Well, this is what's so damaging about this for Russia in the long term. Exactly that the IOC and Thomas Bach and people across sport tried to find a way to say, look, there's obviously been bad things have happened in Russia. We've seen the evidence of the doping, but don't freeze them out. Let's make sure they learn their lesson and they clean up their sport, but we keep them somehow involved. And then we have a Winter Olympics, and within days of it finishing, and the timing I don't think is a coincidence, within days of it finishing, something awful like the attack on Ukraine happens. And you really wonder how many people who, not just Thomas Bach, but throughout sport, throughout business, who have given the benefit of the doubt and have wanted to work with Russians and see if there isn't a way to keep them more involved and see some change there and so on various fronts, now feel like that those efforts have been completely spurned by what's happened.
Excellent stuff. Thank you very much as usual, Simon. All the best. We'll talk again. We'll talk some Champions League when the next round comes up.
Looking forward to it.
Good. Simon
Cheers.
Evans there, hardest working man in show business, as they say. We take a break. We come back with more after these.